In chapter 20 of your e-text covers, basically it's the chapter on microorganisms, and it covers viruses and other infectious particles called viroids and prions, and it also covers bacteria and archaea. There are microorganisms called protozoans, but they're larger, and we cover those in chapter 21. But in chapter 20, what I want to focus on is section 20.1, which is the section on viruses, viroids, and prions. And I'll start by, we're going to spend most of our time on viruses. So I'll start by explaining what a virus is. First of all, what it is not. It's not a cell. A virus is not cellular. A virus cannot reproduce. It does not have metabolism like cells do. It cannot carry out its own chemical reactions. It doesn't consume food or make its own food or any of the things. It has some characteristics of living things, but a virus is not considered a living thing. And I do apologize for my voice. I've had a little cold, but I need to record this because class is coming up. So anyway, what a virus does have is it has a nucleic acid. And I am not real good with using the mouse to write, but I try to at least put a little bit down here. So viruses have nucleic acids. I'll just put Na for nucleic acid. So a virus can have DNA or it can have RNA, one or the other, and the DNA can be single or double-stranded, and the RNA can be single or double-stranded. I know we've always learned in the past in Bio 111 that DNA is double-stranded, RNA is single-stranded, but in viruses, DNA and RNA can both be single or double-stranded. That's one of the ways we classify viruses. So we start out with that all viruses do have nucleic acid in their core, and they are also composed of proteins. So those proteins, primarily that's referring to the coat or the capsid on the outside of the nucleic acid. So you have a nucleic acid core and a protein coat or capsid on the outside. Viruses can also have their own enzymes, but mostly they make use of the enzymes inside of their host cells. So another thing about viruses is that they do require a host. We call them obligate intracellular parasites. Obligate meaning they must have, they're obligated or they must have. Intracellular meaning they must reproduce inside the cell of their host. Excuse me. Inside the cells of their host. They must use the host cell in order to reproduce. And they are also host specific. So each virus is specific to whether or not it will infect a human or a bird or a plant or a bacterium or a fungus. Viruses can infect all types of living cells, even bacteria. So anyway, that's basically to introduce you to what a virus is. It's consists of a nucleic acid with a protein coat on the outside. Viroids only contain RNA, and they only infect plants. Whereas viruses can infect all types of living cells, a viroid is only composed of RNA, no protein, and they only infect plants. Prions are only proteins. They are misfolded proteins. that cause diseases like mad cow. And most of our prion diseases are cause neurodegenerative diseases. That means they cause the brain to deteriorate over time. Now, the scientists that were involved in discovering viruses, Louis Pasteur is the scientist that we associate more so with bacteria, because he discovered the process that we use to pasteurize milk, for example. And we will talk about him in the section on bacteria. But his contribution to viruses occurred when he was studying rabies, and he discovered that the rabies disease must have been transmitted by something much smaller than a bacterium. So he didn't necessarily discover viruses, but he knew that there was something smaller than a bacterium that caused disease, and he used the word virus for the first time, which is Latin for poison. The other scientist, Dmitry Ivanovsky, basically was studying tobacco mosaic virus, which is a plant virus that infects plants in the tobacco family, so that it also will infect tomato plants. But he found out that he used a filter to filter samples of the disease through a filter that was so small that bacteria could have never made it through that filter. So he discovered that it has to be something smaller than a bacterium that was causing the tobacco mosaic disease. This slide basically illustrates the composition of viruses. Viruses always have a core, which is composed of nucleic acid, and sometimes it will also contain enzymes. For example, DNA polymerase, or certain enzymes that maybe are necessary to replicate the nucleic acid. But always there is some version of nucleic acid, DNA or RNA. This is for every type of virus that exists. There we go. And then every virus has a covering. The capsid is found in all viruses, and it's a protein covering. But some viruses have outside the capsid an envelope, and the envelope is composed of phospholipids, so it is able to easily kind of trick cells into engulfing it. So some viruses have an envelope outside the capsid. Now, these are pictures of certain viruses. I would expect you to be able to recognize what they look like. The tobacco mosaic virus is a helical virus. It's an RNA virus that has a helical shaped capsid. Does not have an envelope. The influenza virus that causes the flu does have an envelope. It's an RNA virus. The green part is the capsid. And then you see the envelope that contains spikes. And these spikes are glycoproteins. Glycoproteins. Glyco meaning they're carbohydrate chains with proteins attached. Glycoproteins. You may remember that our own plasma membranes of our cells also contain glycoproteins. So these glycoprotein spikes have to be recognized by the host cell in order for the host cell to become infected with the flu virus. Then we have the adenovirus, which is a virus that has a DNA core and then a capsid. And then we have a bacteriophage, which is a virus that infects bacteria. To me, these bacteriophage viruses look like spaceships. but there's DNA in the core. Then there's a capsid that looks a lot like the adenovirus, but what makes it different is it has this tail sheath with these tail fibers that look kind of like legs. Anyway, I do expect that you recognize the bacteriophage, the adenovirus, the tobacco mosaic virus, and the influenza virus if you were to see a picture. Now, the only other thing I want to mention to you in this introduction is that I don't expect you to know all the examples of viruses by heart or all the examples of bacterial diseases by heart. But I would expect if I were to say HIV, if I were to just say HIV, is that viral or is that bacterial? That you know it's viral. Genital warts is caused by a virus. Syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia are caused by bacteria. So I do expect that you compare tables 20.1 and tables 20.2 that list some common viral diseases and common bacterial diseases. And if I were to give you an example of these diseases, that you would know whether or not it's caused by a virus or caused by a bacterium.